Even though it's only preseason, if you want to see the Broncos not only come out with a win against the visiting Vikings this Saturday from Mile High, but also here at the Chat Sports Studios between our Broncos Breakdown channel and our Vikings Now channel, run by producer Patrick Seatman, go ahead and subscribe today. Broncos versus Vikings for the preseason finale. Week 3 of the NFL preseason is upon us. So we will be breaking down some things to watch for and some roster bubble players to keep an especially close eye on for. Matthew Peterson from Chat Sports here, guiding you guys through. Sure, just a preseason game, but there are still a lot of roster spots up for grabs. So a lot of these players will be very highly motivated to watch for. And hey, it is football. We're not going to complain about it. We just came out of hibernation waiting for football to return. So here's my first storyline to watch for. The battle for QB2. The only battle, Nathaniel Hackett said, the only position that is not up for grabs is the starting quarterback. That belongs to Russell Wilson. Every other position, he said, is absolutely still up for grabs, including the backup for Russell Wilson, which for most of his career, I could have been the backup, and it would not have mattered. But last year, it did matter as Russell Wilson missed time for the first time in his career. So it is going to be a little interesting to see who emerges as that backup. Will it be Josh Johnson or will it be Brett Rypien? If you want to look at their preseason stats, knock yourself out. Here's what they've done so far. I don't think this tells the full story, though, because Josh Johnson has started both games, and he's gone up against the starting defenses, whoever was out there at least, for the Cowboys and for the Bills. Meanwhile, Brett Rypien has had prettier stats so far. More yards, more touchdowns, better rating overall. He's also gone in the second half in the fourth quarter for kind of the sloppy minutes against teams, UDFAs, and third string, corners and defensive linemen and all that. Now, Brett Rypien is expected to get his first start this preseason against the Vikings, and he's got to make the most of it. Honestly, I love Brett Rypien. He's an MVP, at least in ESPN's eyes. Who remembers when we talked about that about a month ago now when ESPN picked Brett Rypien as a MVP candidate? They had some fun with it. Don't take it too seriously. So let's see what he can do. Let's see what the Boise State product can whip out this Saturday against the Vikings. He's got to bring his A game if he wants to probably knock off the leading runner in this race, Josh Johnson. But I'll let you guys decide who you would like to see be the backup quarterback this season. I get it. It's the backup, but it's preseason, and if you love football, if you're a Broncos junkie and a football junkie like I am, and you care about who the backup QB is, just in case, God forbid, they got to go out there, curious, put the number who you'd like to see be backing up Russell Wilson. The next storyline I am watching for is KJ Hamler's return. This is going to be awesome. Now, don't get your hopes up for KJ Hamler to come out and play more than maybe a series. He probably won't be out there past 2 series if it gets to number 2. Now, Mike Kliss reporting from Broncos training camp and preseason just earlier this week saying Hackett reiterates he's going to get KJ Hamler a couple snaps in preseason game Saturday against the Vikings. A couple snaps. To me, that sounds like they have a number in their head. For example, if you watch Hard Knocks, you get to see this actually in person where the coach kind of taps the guy in the helmet and goes, "You're done, right? This is over. You got your couple snaps in. We don't need to risk kind of any sort of injury," especially when Nathaniel Hackett has preached all preseason long, we are not playing for now. We are playing for December and January, and we want guys to be fresh then instead of getting banged up and nicked up right now, which we've already seen from Griffith and Ojemudia. So don't get your hopes up. Plus, let's quickly go down memory lane and remind ourselves that KJ Hamler is not coming back from your run-of-the-mill ACL in 8 to 9 months. No. Tore his ACL in his left knee. He also dislocated his hip. His new ACL came from his right knee. They had to operate on both knees. This is not a standard ACL recovery here. He was in a hospital for 2 weeks. He lost 40 pounds. He said he couldn't shower for a week, okay? So let's give him some time here and let him work himself back 100%. But let's also show the guy some love, too. Because you better believe when KJ Hamler and the Broncos against the Vikings game wraps up, he's going to be searching his name. He wants to see what Broncos country is saying about him. So let's show him some love by typing his jersey number 1 in the comment section right now. The next storyline I personally will be watching pretty closely is just Alex Singleton. That's the story. Because the Broncos lost Jonas Griffith for a couple of weeks. They're optimistic he will return by regular season week 1 in Seattle. So they signed Joe Schobert just as a kind of insurance policy. And they had him for 6-8 days, and they said, we've seen enough. So it looks like it's likely going to be Alex Singleton starting week 1 unless Jonas Griffith can return from that elbow injury. Knock on wood that he can. But in the meantime, these are your starting linebackers. Josie Jewell and Alex Singleton inside. So I want to see how Singleton fares. I also am curious to see how much work he gets, right? Does Nathaniel Hackett want him to get ramped up and get close to game speed? Or is he going to take the approach of, you are our starting linebacker. We cannot afford to lose 2 starting inside linebackers in preseason. You can play 1 series and then you're back on the bench. Now, there is some news I want to get to really quickly here because after the Broncos lost Barrington Wade, who they waived with injury designation and can probably come back on IR, yada, 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 with an elbow injury, they went out and made a signing. Jeremiah Gemmel, the UDFA from the University of North Carolina, UNC Tar Heels, who was waived by the San Francisco 49ers last week when they had to get down to 80-man roster limit. This was one of their waiving cuts right there. So look for him this Saturday against the Vikings. Don't expect him to really have much of an impact. The Broncos need to have or would like to have 80 players on their roster. So if you need some help at inside linebacker, why don't you bring someone on just to get those types of reps? And who knows? A lot of these moves are sometimes made because they want to get this guy some tape so he can hopefully kind of beef up his resume for maybe the next team that's going to look at him more seriously. Now, Jonas Griffith. Let's kind of wrap up this Alex Singleton inside linebacker story with this quick note. I believe the Broncos are probably okay with not going out and getting a big-time name replacement for Jonas Griffith. They are probably looking at the schedule right now thinking, we can tread some water until he returns. Even if he's not ready for week 1 at Seattle, you turn around and you play the Texans at home the next week. Rookie running back Dameon Pierce, I think he's going to be a very good rookie running back, but it's not Derrick Henry. Then they have the 49ers come into town, which is a little bit different because you know Shanahan loves to bring out these exotic, to say the least, run packages and whatnot. And then you go on the road to Oakland. Ooh, what year is it? Go on the road to Vegas and take on the Raiders. But all in all, the first 4 games, you're not playing a serious top contending rushing team outside of the 49ers, which will be interesting with Trey Lance. But I think they can survive with Alex Singleton if it takes all the way to week 3 until Jonas Griffith can return. All right, next segment here. Let's look at some roster bubble players, right? Guys that really need to make a case for themselves to land on this 53-man roster, starting with the rookie corner, Faion Hicks, out of the University of Wisconsin. Now, let's peek at the depth chart here for the cornerback room, because everyone on screen right now, at least the faces you can see, they are all locks to make this roster, along with Damari Mathis. I have got 4 locks for this roster. Outside of that, it's up for grabs. Like Ojemudia, you guys, if you've watched the show before, you know I'm a big fan of his. But right now it feels like he is not even close to being safe. He's a bubble guy who unfortunately is injured and won't be able to prove his tape and prove himself in this game against the Vikings. So insert the rookie, the 7th-round pick, Hicks, who has not been bad so far in the preseason. He just hasn't been super noteworthy, right? He hasn't come away with a big interception or a forced fumble, but he also hasn't been burned and he hasn't been exposed as like this guy is not able to hang in the NFL. He cannot run with the best of them. So I'll be watching for Hicks to see if he can try and make a case to steal a roster spot from someone like Ojemudia. Next roster bubble player. Let's talk about Jonathon Cooper. 7th-round pick as well as Hicks, except last year from Ohio State. And he enters a pretty crowded outside linebacker room that is just super competitive because the Broncos got some locks at this position. Randy Gregory, Bradley Chubb, Nick Bonito, Baron Browning. 4 guys, right? Automatic locks right there. Doesn't leave a lot of wiggle room for Jonathon Cooper, who had some good games last year. Wasn't it the Cowboys game he really kind of came on the scene? So I'm going to be watching for Cooper to see if he can try and force George Paton to take on maybe 6 outside linebackers. Malik Reed is right there too. So if the Broncos take Reed, that's 5. Can Cooper be number 6? I mean, it kind of makes a little bit of sense when you take into account that Gregory and Chubb have a history of not staying healthy, and Nick Bonito hasn't necessarily set the world on fire as a rookie so far, so you can make the case for building in some extra depth there. Next bubble player, I'm just lumping all of the wide receivers together outside of the big names because this has been a very fun battle to watch all preseason long, right? We know Courtland Sutton, Jerry Jeudy, KJ Hamler are going to make this roster. So will Montrell Washington. But after that, nothing is a guarantee. Kendall Hinton, Tyree Cleveland, Seth Williams, Jalen Virgil, Brandon Johnson, all of these guys are going to be duking it out for the last roster spot or 2. Now, I think Tyree Cleveland, who is out with a throat injury, I get the sense that he's kind of safe. Just based off the way, I mean, for example, Uten was talking about him after the presser earlier this week, and he was like, we can't wait to see what he does in special teams for us. So I get the sense of he's going to be making this roster. Brandon Johnson has sort of been my favorite of this group of UDFA wide receivers that have looked really strong so far, right? He's kind of this year's maybe, for at least me, the Trinity Benson of like, this wide receiver can play. And then you kind of learn, all right, it is just preseason. It's not the same when you go up against other, real starting cornerbacks. But I've loved what I've seen out of Brandon Johnson so far. He was getting a healthy dose of targets in the Cowboys game. And then the Bills game, everything went to shit. So it's really hard to have a concrete takeaway. No one looked all that good. The Broncos' offense stunk. So you can't really pencil in one play or one player for it. It's kind of just a bad collective group effort right there. But I'm going to be watching for Brandon Johnson out of UCF to come out and have a big game and sort of, I wouldn't say be a Tim Patrick replacement, but he does offer you a skill set that was similar to Patrick's, right? A red zone target, a big threat, an easy big target, kind of a blanket wide receiver. That's sort of what Brandon Johnson's forte is, sort of a beat the corner for the high point and bring down the football. Now, I know there's a lot of strong opinions about a whole bunch of these different receivers, from Virgil to Kendall Hinton and all these guys. But which bubble wide receiver do you like the most, right? Who has kind of been your guy that you've been watching the closest and you are pulling for him to make this 53-man roster and be the last wide receiver to crack it? And then we probably don't ever see him during the regular season, but that's preseason, right? We fall in love with these guys, and then they ghost us. And we kind of remember, oh yeah, we never get to see any of the preseason stars in the regular season for the most part, unless it's like a Phillip Lindsay, so to speak. But you get the gist of like, yeah, we need to come down to earth a little bit. All right, that is going to do it for us on today's show. Appreciate all of you guys for tuning in. Make sure you tune in for our post-game show after the Broncos-Vikings game goes final. We'll be breaking down the latest news and rumors from Mile High and what to expect as we enter 53-man roster cutdown day on Tuesday. So make sure you stay tuned for that. Until then, go Broncos.